I feel horrible because, I mean, which good thing he's at the hospital, and I'm glad that I made the call so that he's there, but I don't know why he's there, and I don't know what happened. I honestly don't, and I really do care for him.
Friends, this is the case of 9-month-old Colton Senogles. His mother Caitlin took him to the home of Jennifer Baldwin. This video will contain Jennifer Baldwin's police interview. Jennifer called 911 stating Colton is struggling to breathe. It was March the 25th, 2018 in the state of Minnesota. I'm going to start this video by first showing you the audio-only interview between police and Jennifer when they arrived at the house. Then I'm going to show you the audio interview from the police station. I do have some of the crime scene photos. They'll be shown throughout. Let me know if you think she's guilty.
And then he threw up on the way here. So I had to clean up some on the floor. It was, like formula or whatever. And I said, oh, is he sick? And she said, no, that it's just, just the formula that he just kind of threw back up. And, but then, right at when so she took him out and then handed him to me. And then she left and he was and I sat him down because he can sit up and crawl. And so I sat him down or whatever, and he kind of got a little fussy at first, when his mom walked out, but then he was fine for just a short while, and then he was getting fussy, so I checked his diaper, I changed his diaper, and then I made him a bottle, and I laid him on the boppy pillow thing, which I think he uses that a lot at his house, and gave that to him, and he started drinking it, and then he fell asleep. So I just, I was sitting right on the couch, and he's just, sitting, he's just sleeping. And then he, so we're being quiet, watching TV. Well, then he wakes up, and then he, is like kind of fussy, and so I gave him a second to see if he would just go fall back asleep, which, because some, babies do. And so then he was just kind of fussy. So then I picked him up.
So he fell asleep in that?
He fell asleep.
In that little pillow thing there?
Yep, and then he had this blanket kind of, like around him. He likes a blanket. And, and so then I got him up, and that's when I know, I'm like, and he was just like,
How long was he sleeping for, do you think?
Maybe 20 minutes, half hour max, no longer.
Okay.
And then when I got him up, then I noticed that his, his outfit was wet, probably from on the throwing up, and then from, drinking and yeah. Yep. So then I go and grab another outfit. I laid him on the floor. I changed his outfit, but as I'm changing him, so he's just in his diaper, his eyes were just kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, I know when a baby's tired where they're like this, where they're like fighting it, right. But it's like almost seemed like, I don't know, I don't know how to, it was like his eyes were like, well, I'm like, Colton, and he didn't seem alert, like Colton, and you at this, 9 months, he'll look at you when he hears your name,
Yeah.
And so he wasn't being alert. So I'm like, Colton, and then, so then after that, so then I got him dressed, and
was he on the floor still when you were doing that, or did you pick him up?
I picked him up. Okay. And then so then I was holding him for a second, and I was just walking back and forth and holding him like this with my hand on his back so that I could make sure I could feel that right. That he was breathing. So then I got him dressed, and then he kind of seemed to act okay for a second, and then I got him dressed, and then he just kind of was still like, he would then he'd like kind of fall asleep on me for a second, and then he'd wake up, but then it's like he was doing this, like he didn't want to hold his head up. Uh-huh. And so then I don't know, just right away, so I called his mom, Caitlin, and I said, you got to get here. I said, I don't know if I'm being overly protective, what I said, but something is, and I don't know. I know that he's been to the hospital a few times, so maybe, I don't know, his, he's supposed to, I guess he still does nebs at times. I don't know. But I had, I felt something, I just didn't feel comfortable. I felt like, so then I call her. So then she's like, okay, I'm going to leave, whatever. And then a minute later, her boyfriend or fiance calls me Logan, the dad, and says, I'm on my way, what's going on? And I told him, and he said, call the ambulance.
Yeah.
And so, and I literally hung up with him, and I called the ambulance right away. And then,
do you think could he like hit his head on anything, or
no, there was nothing around him except for that brown blanket, and he was laying right here.
Okay.
I mean, this is the only thing that may have been but no. I mean, he was laying right here, and you can see it's all wet because when he fell asleep drinking his bottle,
yeah,
it so I took his bottle away and set it on the table because it was like he fell asleep drinking it, so it was like dripping. That's how his outfit got wet.
right. Okay.
And he was sleeping on the couch, and she was in the room, and I was just sitting on the couch next to him watching TV.
Sure. Yeah, I gotcha. So when you were trying to like wake him up, did you shake him at all, or just kind of pat him, or what'd you?
No, and no, he was awake because his eyes were open. But when he was crying down here, I'm like Colton, or whatever. So I picked him up. I'm like, it's okay, just doing this,
Just
like
kind of
it's
patting
okay.
his back, yeah.
Yeah, because he was just seemed like he was upset. But then when then his outfit was wet, so I went to go change him. I laid him on the floor. That's when his eyes started. So then when he was just in his diaper, I didn't even wait to put his clothes back on. I picked him up, in just his diaper. And so I'm just doing this or whatever and patting his back and having my hand, rubbing his back and having my hand on his back so that I can hear or I feel that he's breathing, because sometimes, I just wanted to make sure, because then that's what I was freaking out, because I know he was recently in the hospital, was having breathing issues. So I was making, so then he seemed to be doing better, and it sounded like he was like really congested, or like sounded like, I don't know, he's just like right in like the chest area, which, he was recently sick. And so then he seemed to be better for a second. So then I set him on the ground, put his onesie on, but then he just wasn't alert. I'm like, Colton, and he just seemed like really tired, but it wasn't his normal self tired. And I know that he had just woken up from a short nap, so I'm like, okay, he could, but I didn't feel comfortable laying him back down just because of how. So that's why until you guys got here, I was holding him the whole time, because I wanted to be able to make sure that I could physically feel that that there was a heartbeat.
Right.
Because I don't know that, they've told me he's been in the hospital a few times, and they've had to bring home I'm not sure what it's called, a nebulizer, I think, or something that he's had to use at home. I know that they've done that before. I don't know. I called his mom right away, and then called you guys, and she just said he threw up. I thought she said last night, and then he did throw up this on the way here. So I don't know. And then he was fussy shortly after he got here, so I gave him a bottle, and he fell asleep, and then woke up, and then all this
like
happened.
That,
and it was, he was kind of like, he was like that, and then for a minute he was kind of alert, and then he went like that again. So when he was kind of alert, that's when I then got him dressed. Because I had been at first, when I laid him down to change his outfit that was soaking wet, that's when I could see his eyes doing that. And I'm like, so then I picked him up and was holding him, and I'm pacing back and forth from the sink to the door, and I was on the phone with his mom while I'm doing it, and I'm like, Colton, and I had my hand here to make sure that I could feel a heartbeat. And then all of a sudden, he made a couple noises, or grunting or whatever, and then it seemed like he was fine, again. So then I laid him back down on the floor, put his outfit back on, put an outfit on him, and then picked him back up, and then I was holding him until you guys got here.
Okay.
So, and he sleeps, I guess, because, I just bring this out for him, but Caitlin, the mom, and Logan, the dad, both say that he both sleeps using this quite often, but I was sitting right here, and he was right here, so,
Sure. I got you. Okay.
Is Caitlin the mom?
Caitlin is, yes.
Do mom and dad live together?
They do. They live together at Caitlin's mom's house.
So that's the end of the initial police interview at her house. They then take her to the station a day later, interview her again. I want to play that for you now. Before I do, let me give you some of the autopsy results so you can understand the impact, the injuries on the child. So there was evidence of blunt force head injury, a subdural hematoma, there was brain damage and cell death caused by oxygen and blood deprivation. There were contusions on the left scalp and right ear. In addition, the examination of the child's eyes revealed retinal hemorrhages in both eyes extended through all retinal layers, retinal folds, and hemorrhages surrounding the optic nerves. But at this moment, the child is still alive at the hospital. Let me play the second interview for you now, then at the end I'll give you the full police report.
Sitting on the couch with my son who had fallen asleep, and he sat up and was fussing. So I got up and picked him up. And when I picked him up, then I noticed that because he was wearing just what do you call them, like the one piece, button up, snap up outfit, like a onesie. Yep. And so it was wet, and it was probably from, with his bottle when he fell asleep dripping. So I was holding him and went to the dining room into the diaper bag to grab another outfit. And then I laid him on the floor in the living room, and I was taking his outfit off. And when I took his outfit off, that's when all of a sudden, I don't know Colton very well. I do, but I don't. But I have 4 kids, so I worked at a hospital for 10 years, so I'm pretty, But he wasn't. He was seemed like, he was so he was laying there, and he had his coat, but then he was laying there, and he all of a sudden was like this or whatever. I don't know. It just seemed kind of weird. I'm like, Colton, and he wouldn't look at me, which usually a kid would, make eye contact. And he didn't do that. And so then I picked him up, and, I was holding him for a second or whatever, just kind of popped, and he rests his head on me, and I was just kind of rubbing his back and, patting his back. And then, then I looked at him again, and then he seemed, so I didn't know if at first maybe if he was just kind of a little tired or just waking up, I don't know. So then I laid him back down on the floor so that I could put the outfit on him. And then when I was putting the outfit back on him, I noticed there's something with his eyes again where he was I don't even know how to explain it, I don't know how to explain it. His eyes were fluttering and stuff? Well, not it was but then it's his eyes would roll back, and I don't know, it was different, not, I don't know how to explain it. It was just different. And then, so then I picked him up again, and then he was kind of breathing, and it kind of sounded like he had which, because I know my kids have had it before, if they have a bunch of crap, in their lungs, which doctors will tell you it's kind of gross, but you blow in their mouth and then a bunch of crap will come out of their nose, And so he was kind of, breathing kind of almost almost after you've been crying and the baby's calming down type of cry, he was just acting. It was weird. There was, I don't know, something from just, and then when I was holding him for a minute, he put his head down. So he was laying on my shoulder, and I was just kind of walking back and forth and rocking him. And then then all of a sudden he put his head up, but then he was putting his head back or whatever. And and then I was like, Colton. And he wasn't, she was looking, or his eyes were still doing that. And so right away I called Caitlin. And I said, you need to come and get Colton. I said, something's not right. And so I
What was the most distressing thing that you saw that he was doing?
It was when I was holding him, he was just, or when I was changing him, he was in a different world. He was just his eyes were half open, and he's and then when I would say Colton, most kids will look at you, and he wouldn't do that. So, I don't know how to explain it. It was just really weird when I when I went to go change him, and that's why I picked him up right away so he was just in a diaper at first. And, and I was like, and then I put him back down to get him dressed because I didn't want him to get cold. But then I picked him back up again. And I don't know, because I know that he recently he's been in the hospital a few times, and I don't know everything. I think one time they said RSV or something. But a few weeks ago, he was at the hospital, and it was something to do with breathing. They had him, I don't know if they had him on oxygen, but they sent home a nebulizer with him, and they did, I guess the doctor did say that possibly could be asthma, but at that young of age, they don't really, like to give you the diagnosis of asthma. So it was just his breathing, it just, I don't know, it just didn't, like with his eyes and his breathing, it just didn't, I don't know, I just had like that, I don't know, that mother instinct, or I don't know what do you call it, but so I called her and I just said, Caitlin, and because I was just kind of, freaking out. I'm like, Caitlin, you need to come and get Colton. And she said, why? And I said, there's just something not right. I said, when I went and I explained it to her, that he fell asleep shortly with the bottle, but then woke up. And I said, when I was changing him, I said that it was just, there was something about in his eyes where his eyes were kind of like rolling back, or like, like, I don't know. I was trying to explain it to her, and I said, and I said in his breathing, I said, he's breathing, but I kept, so as I was worried, because I know that he has, which I don't know exactly what his diagnoses are from being in the hospital before. I just know that he has been there for sometimes for his breathing. So that's what I was panicking more as far as, because he was kind of like just breathing a little different. So when I was holding him, I had my hand he's right here, and had my hand like here the whole time so that I could feel his heartbeat. And so I was just holding her, and I just said, you need to come and get him. Something just doesn't feel right. And so then a few minutes later, Logan, who's the dad, had called me, and I kind of explained to him again, what was going on or whatever. And I said, I know that he was, recently in the hospital. And I said, I don't know. I said, I just don't feel comfortable. Something's not right. I just have this,
So you weren't super nervous, but it didn't feel right.
Well, at first I'm like, am I overreacting? But then as he kept I'd be like, Colton, Colton. And I kept saying his name, and he would not, and then I would put him, flip him, and lay him like this. I'm like, Colton, Colton. And he's still doing that eye thing that, and would not look at me. And so then Logan called me, and I kind of explained to him, what was going on. And they, know that he has some previous health ish or whatever, from being at the hospital. So, he had just said, well, he said, I'm on my way. And, and at this time, because it was kind of freaking me out, because he wasn't acting like he should be. I know how he is when he's, normal, or, and so, I just told him that he needed, so he says, I'm on my way and whatever. And I said, okay. And I'm kind of crying, and I'm like, please just get here. And he says, well, if you need to, he says, call an ambulance. And I literally hung up with him, and I looked at Colton again. I was holding him, and I looked at him, and he still was doing that, kind of fading in and out of sleep, but he just didn't look right. I don't know how to explain it, but so I made the decision, and I just called 911. Because I know that he was just 3 weeks ago in the hospital for something with his oxygen level, or with breathing, and the nebulizer, and which I think he still takes. I'm not sure, but I know that it was recent. So I just didn't want to mess around. And so I called the ambulance, and then, they came, and then Logan came, a few minutes after. he just started yelling at me or whatever, and he's like, something happened. He's like, what happened, Jennifer, or whatever. I'm like, what? I was like, nothing. And he's like, he has a bruise on his head. I'm like, now there's a bruise? I'm like, a bruise? So then he sent me a picture, and he's like, and it's weird because I'm like, well, I didn't notice a bruise when, I'm sorry, it's my boyfriend. And I said, I didn't notice the bruise when he was here. And I said, and when the police and when the EMT were here, I said, there was no mention about a bruise. And he told me, he said, I didn't see a bruise either. And he said, but there is one now. And I'm like, so then, I mean, he's just yelling at me. He's like, so what happened? And he was like, if you don't tell me, the police are going to be there and they're going to be questioning you. He's like, just yelling at me. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and I told him what happened. I'm like, I don't know what happened. I said he was a little fussy. I said, Caitlin told me he threw up last night and had a fever. And then he threw up today. And I said, and I told him, how Caitlin said he was just like I explained it today. He was just very fatigued and just very tired, like. And she said he was like that yesterday. Well, and then I'm talking about the bruise, and which kind of it was kind of weird. I said, well, I didn't see one, and I said, he goes, well, I didn't see one at the house either, but there is one now. And then he tells me, because he starts work fairly early, I want to say 7:30, I think is when he has to be there. So he's fairly early. And he had said that, he said, well, there was no bruise on his head this morning before I left for work or something. Well, and I didn't think about it at the time, but then after I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, before you go to work in the morning, who usually checks over there? You know what I mean? I mean, Caitlin was there,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, well, why would you check his head? Or I don't know. It just seemed weird how I find out about the bruise or whatever, and then he's telling me, well, I didn't see it at your house either, but it's there now. But then telling me, he's like, well, Jenny, something happened because it wasn't there this morning because I checked before I left for work. I checked and there was no bruise, which I didn't, at the time I'm crying and I'm just trying to gather all this, and then afterwards I'm thinking about it. I'm like, why would he tell me that he checked this morning and there was no bruise on his head?
It concerns me that he got so sick so fast, and so I don't know. I don't honestly know if that means that it likely happened either right before he got dropped off or while he was in your care. I don't know what that means.
I mean, but he was sick the night before, and so she had already, when I called and tell her, you got to come pick him up because he's just, there's just something, he's just, something not right. And she had said that she was planning on bringing him into the hospital because she thought that he may have the flu or pneumonia or whatever because somebody else just recently died or something. And he had a fever yesterday and threw up yesterday and this morning on the way to my house. So why she didn't just go right to the doctor, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, I didn't have him
these things happen from time to time. We investigate them. I wouldn't say fairly often, but, infants in particular aren't really good at protecting themselves because they're helpless, basically.
Right.
And we do get cases like this from time to time. And it is very rare when we find an infant's been injured by somebody intentionally.
Right.
Usually what happens is they've been dropped. They've been put on a bed or something.
I know that not with me, but I know that, Caitlin had shared with me before, and I couldn't tell you when or how, if it's happened more than once. I know he has fallen off the bed before.
Well, the last couple like this that I worked, one, the baby fell out of one of those mechanized swings.
Yep.
And, it's accidental. These things are almost always accidental.
Right.
The one before that, the baby was on the bed and rolled or was jostled and fell and hit his head on the floor. I mean, like I said, these things are usually accidental.
Right.
Well, the doctors are telling us that this injury is what they call acute. and again, I'm not a doctor, but they've explained this to us. They feel that this is an acute injury, meaning this didn't happen 24 hours before you called for an ambulance. This happened within a fairly narrow window before the emergency was determined. Now, that doesn't mean you have anything to do with it. I'm just saying the doctors, they receive a lot of training in these sorts of injuries, and they're telling us that this is an acute injury that couldn't have happened too much before the police and the ambulance were called.
Yeah, and I didn't have them very much before, and and I don't know, I have, so Logan sent me a picture of the bruise, or of, this side of his face, and Andy, had looked at it, and, because, it's there, but it's kind of, it's there, but it's not like whoa,
Yeah.
and there's like a little mark or a line or something, and Andy said, and just out, I don't know, and he wasn't even there, he was working at the time, but he said, that looks like a car door. That's what because of there's like a little line or something, that's what he had said. He's like, that looks like, like that a car door, like you had, and if she was in a hurry, I'm not saying that, but that's just what his thought, But then when we were talking to Luke, Logan's brother, for a quick minute, when he came to get Logan's car, and I was asking how he was doing, and I had told him, I said, well, Caitlin had told me that he threw up last night and had a fever, and he's like, he didn't have a fever last night. I was like, Caitlin told me he did, and he's like, he didn't. He was just, like angry and just like calling me a liar because I'm telling him something that Colton's mom told me. Why would she lie about it? If he had a fever, he did. She told me on the phone he had a fever last night, and she even had the towel around the diaper bag.
The reason I mention that, Jenny, is I want you to understand. We weren't there. We don't know what happened. You may not have been wherever this happened either. But I need you to understand something that's really important right here, right now.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, when these things happen, it's been the result of an accident. Baby got dropped. Baby rolled off the couch. Somebody fell asleep. Something bad happened. And sometimes people don't want to tell us that. The problem. Just let me finish before you offer a response. But the problem when they don't tell us this accident happened is that it leaves people later on to wonder whether it was intentional or not. And like I said, it's a rare person who intentionally harms a child.
Right.
And I guess my point is, if something happened as an accident, that's something we need to know now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if our investigation ultimately determines that he was injured in your care and you've said there were no accidents, that leaves people only to conclude there were only intentional things that happened. And so if you dropped him, for example, it's really important that we understand this so we can frame this investigation in a way that's fair.
I literally carried him from the kitchen probably like 10 steps and sat him down. Now I sat him up, and I had, and then I had to go get the boppy pillow because he is still wobbly, and, sometimes he'll be sitting there and he reaches for a toy and he tips over, but I have carpet. My son and him were playing, and, Caitlin would even tell me that there's been several times that Colton grabs a toy, whatever, and whacks himself in the head, because, he's a baby. I know my daughter, kids do that, but I didn't drop him.
Well, the doctors have told us that this injury, it's not possible that a child could have done this to themselves by tipping over or some of the things you described. I've got a couple of kids and they're older, but I get exactly what you're saying. Kids do all kinds of stuff,
right.
But the doctors, when they've looked at these injuries, have said this isn't something that could have happened, and whomever was with him at the time wouldn't know that he'd fallen or been dropped.
Yeah, he never cried. The only time that I ever stepped away was just to quick go to the bathroom, which I left the door open, and then to go make his bottle. And that's all within, 15 feet from where, he never, except for that little fussiness that he did when I took the bottle away from him that was my son's and I gave him, that's the only time. And then the little fussiness that he had when his mom left.
And here's my concern is how he was able to play for 20 minutes on the floor, hold himself.
Well, he was just sitting there, and my son was like handing him toys.
Right. And again, I'm not a doctor. I think they'll be able to narrow this much further down for us, and they'll be able to answer questions that I have now that I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. Colton's the only one that knows what happened, and the person who was there with him when he got hurt. All I know is he has a severe injury to his head that must have happened from either a large fall or something falling on him or someone
He
striking.
didn't fall unless a toy. He didn't fall.
Yeah, and they're explaining it that unfortunately it would have to be something very violent, something that, you know, a large item hit him or he fell down the stairs or something like that, something that had a
I
considerable.
mean, the door's always shut because I have a 3 and a 2-year-old.
Right.
So I mean, the door's shut and it even has the child-proof locks on it. I mean, I have the lock on my stove. I mean, my house is very. I mean, I have the lock, the child safety things on all the doors, and I have it on my stove and everything because my kids are at that age. You know, on the cupboards, you have to, you know, you can't just open them. You have that's the kid. You know, I mean, my house is like safety or kid proof or whatever. I mean, no, he's never even been in my basement.
Well, like I said, we wanted to make sure that we gave you the opportunity to tell us that.
Yeah,
We don't have hard answers tonight on timelines and exactly when they'll be able to narrow down when this occurred, but I suspect it's going to be close to the time either she dropped him off or he was in your care. You've got my card.
So now the question, because you asked that, so if somebody called CPS, they called them today,
That's,
or
I believe so, but I'm
so
not
is
sure
that
yet.
somebody then calling with concerns about Caitlin or Logan?
Well, one of the issues is there's nobody at CPS right now. You know, by the time I heard that somebody may have made a report, it was after hours. I can't call them, so I don't know. I just know that supposedly a report was made, but I don't know who called yet. I don't know what they alleged. I don't know what it involves.
I would have no reason to call because I mean Caitlin's kind of. If you ever watch them show Friends, I don't know if you ever do, but Phoebe, how she's just kind of like floozy, kind of sometimes. That's Caitlin, but she's never given me the impression, you know, that she would do any. I mean, would have no reason to.
Okay.
Oh no. I mean, you could pull up my call log.
I'm not accusing you. It's just a question I have to ask because I don't want to have to find you tomorrow and ask you if you know that. That's all. If you did, I would just like to know why.
I mean, if I did, I would tell you. I would be
Okay.
honest with you and tell you. But no,
Okay.
I have no reason to call Anoka Child Protection.
Okay.
Do you have any questions for us at all? And is it okay if we contact you again and ask you some more questions?
Yeah, no, you can call me whenever you need to. I'm always have my phone. Just, you know, it's either somewhere close to me.
So there's a lot of people tonight that are very hurt. And they're very sad.
Well, I have been since this happened. I mean, my mom tried to calm me down. My cousin, even Andy. I mean, I've been because I feel horrible because. I mean, which is a good thing he's at the hospital, and I'm glad that I made the call so that he's there, but I don't know why he's there, and I don't know what happened. I honestly don't, and I really do care for him. And I mean, Caitlin's a good friend of mine.
Well, there's a lot of work that we have to do yet and talk to the medical people to try and figure out what happened. And so we're not accusing you. We just have to ask these difficult questions. We've had to ask Caitlin these same questions and Logan and some other people. And so it's all part of the job, and we don't mean to hurt you or upset you.
But my question is, though, and if you could just, because I really do, and after talking with my cousin, who my cousin did, I don't know if she graduated, but she did go to college at some point for like criminal justice, social, like in that area. And she even thought that I was odd when I told her that when I was talking to Logan on the phone the first time, and he was telling me the second time, and he was like started yelling at me and was saying that something happened, and now this bruise, and I'm like, what bruise? I'm like, I never saw, and I was like, and he didn't have a bruise. And he's like, well, I didn't see one there either, but now there is one. And he said to me, which I didn't think anything at the time, but after talking to a few people, they're all saying, why would he make that comment that he checked his son or didn't see anything on his son? prior to him going to work this morning. I mean,
let me put your mind at ease a little bit about that. He'd explained that he gets up to go to work before everybody else does, and he goes over and he checks on him and gives him a kiss and tucks him in, and I did that with my kids, and so I don't think it's really weird. But if you didn't understand the context, I get that would be a weird thing to say. So I mean, but I don't know. Strike me as
I don't know how Colton lays because he was laying on his back, but then when he did. He was laying like this, and then he just kind of went like this, and it was more or less, they moved his hand, and he was still laying on his belly, and he was laying on this side of his head,
okay.
But then he sat up,
yeah.
And then he, was just kind of fussy, and he seemed fine. I mean, he just wasn't he's usually a pretty happy, smiley baby, and he wasn't that when she dropped him off. And was kind of fussy when she dropped him off, which has never happened before. And then, and she even said how he was very tired last night, too, just like he was this morning. Prior to her bringing him, she said he's just been, very extremely tired. And, I mean, I literally
part of the reason why we wanted to tell you that there's a lot of emotion and stuff going on because everybody else is struggling with what happened and what could have happened. If you have problems at the house tonight, if people show up or if they call you, or
I mean, I've already had Logan. I mean, yelling at me, and I would never ever.
But feel free to call 911 right away. The officers are aware of what happened today, and they'll send someone out to help you right away.
So now I have to worry about someone possibly coming to my house, and I live there by myself.
I don't anticipate any issues, but I do want to be honest with you that there are a lot of people that are struggling with a lot of high emotions right now.
Well, I mean, I could tell that from Logan on the phone, and I could tell that from Luke, who I've never met, who was coming to get the car. I mean, he was just very short with me, and I said, Caitlin said he had a fever last night. He didn't have a freaking fever. I mean, just snapped, and I don't even, and I understand that's his nephew, and I understand. I mean, I've been dealing with this and crying, and I mean...
There's lots of people feeling upset, and
I mean, I'm upset too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would like to know. I mean, I did. Yeah. I mean, I've cared for him several times, and he's never ever. I mean, he's never even gone back to them in a wet diaper. I mean, as soon as that line starts turning a little blue, a new diaper is on. I mean,
Well, we don't think somebody's going to come to your house. Chuck just wants you to be comfortable calling us if you have a concern. That's all. Okay? They're in search of answers just like you are. People are upset. You imagine how upset you would be if this was your own child.
I mean, no, I totally understand, so, but I mean,
we just want you to be.
They're coming at me as if I did something wrong, which they know I would never do because they trusted me to watch their kid, and I have other children, and I'm actually overly I mean, I don't even I won't unless, an adult's there or something. I'll have somebody come over to watch, or make sure that my oldest is in the living room watching my two youngest ones or to shower. I mean, I just, I don't, some people say, oh, just shower and leave the door open. No, because if something happens, then you got to get out, get dressed quick. And, I mean, I just, or I wait until make sure that they're in bed. I mean, I'm just very, it feels so bad for that little boy.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
So you said those chances aren't good, or they are good, or
I think he has a significant injury, and where it goes from here, I guess is going to be up to the doctors and stuff down at the hospital.
So he's still he's still breathing and everything.
That's
and
the last update.
He's still doing okay.
So that's the end of the police interview. I know she doesn't quite give you the information you were looking for, but let me read out the police report to you. It'll give you more clarification. So when the police arrived at the house, they saw the child to be lethargic and laboring to breathe. The child was then transported by ambulance to the hospital, where he was treated for a severe head injury, including intracranial bleeding and swelling. Unfortunately, 5 days later is when Colton died. He suffered severe brain death. Now, where the conundrum for me is that when police spoke to Caitlin, the mother, Caitlin got to Jennifer's house at 10 a.m. Jennifer called police at 11:50. This means the injuries inflicted on the child either happened in that 1 hour and 50-minute period, or they happened before and it escalated in that period. So who's at fault? You understand what I'm saying? So, a pediatric child abuse specialist from Midwest Children's Resource Center was consulted regarding the child's injuries. The specialist suggested that a child who has sustained injuries, the same injuries as Colton, according to this expert, the injuries would manifest symptoms such as lethargy and unresponsiveness immediately after the infliction of the injury. So according to them, this kind of injury that he had happened in that moment. It wasn't something that happened over time. Now, after the autopsy report came in, the police spoke to Jennifer one more time. She admitted she handled the boy aggressively and roughly on that morning. She said she had never handled a child that roughly before. Jennifer did confirm when the child came in the morning, he was completely fine and he was playing with his toys normally. She said she had not gotten much sleep the night before and she had not taken her medications for anxiety and mood disorder that morning. She had issues with the CPS, as you heard, and she has just regained at that time custody of her children. She was also experiencing financial problems. So because of this, Jennifer was sentenced to 21 years in prison. I mean, it seems like she admitted what she did, but then it makes me think, how severe was the punishment that within the hour, you injured the boy so much that the pain lasts for 5 days and then he passes away? What the fuck? Anyway, comment, tell me what you think.